So if you've ever sat through a body scan and you've come up maybe with nothing, or you've been asked to find an emotion in your chest and maybe you felt only something blank or that you couldn't identify, there is a mechanical reason for this thing. These instructions are asking your nervous system for some kind of signal or some kind of information that isn't reliably handing over to your mind, to your brain, or is a signal that sometimes takes longer to arrive. On Tuesday's episode, I went into interoception, which is the nervous system's ability to read internal signals. These are things like heartbeat or hunger and the sensations that we label as emotions that are often coming from these places. And also I got into alexithymia, which is the difficulty or differences around identifying and describing those emotions. Now, both of these things are different for a lot of neurodivergent people in particular, and that's fairly well researched and documented already. At least the basics are. So I'll link to that episode in the description, and if you're watching the video, it'll also be on the screen somewhere around my head here. But I'll go over the basics in a moment. Today is about what to actually do when your body doesn't give you those signals in a usable form, because the standard advice is often made for nervous systems that work differently from ours. The instruction you might hear in a class, or maybe from your therapist, or maybe in a podcast or a book, often goes something like this. Notice what's happening in your chest, or name that emotion. Locate where you feel that in your body. Those kind of directions ask for a couple of things at once. These directions are asking you to detect an internal signal, and they also ask you to label that signal, like as a specific emotion sometimes, or a kind of sensation. For brains with low interoceptive accuracy, the first part is already quite unreliable, and the second part depends on that first part. So it gets really difficult for us with these challenges or differences. So you can't name an emotion from your data that's coming from your nervous system because your nervous system isn't delivering that data, or maybe that data is arriving at a different time, late and or vague. So the body scan that is happening here stalls. And this is for a structural reason. It starts in the one place in your system that has the least reliable access. And then it asks you to build an interpretation on top of that thing. So pushing harder into that internal signal that just isn't there at that time tends to produce frustration in our brains. Or if you don't know that it's frustration, it might be that kind of flat or blankness thing, or in some cases it might be distress. What it rarely does, though, is produce more information. Here's the shift that worked for my system, and it comes out of my CRIM training. CRIM, C-R-M, stands for Community Resilience Model. And one of the skills that I learned is called tracking, and this is a body awareness practice, similar to these scanning practices. But the thing that makes it usable, for me at least, is that it can, when adjusted appropriately, work for external sensations as well as these internal ones. And it changes the question that you're asking yourself, that you're asking your brain. So a quick note before I get into this. You know your body better than I do. Everything here is just something to try, and you're welcome to change anything that I say or skip it if it doesn't fit you. So there's no "what emotion do you feel" prompt in this tracking activity. You're noticing a sensation, and you note whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. That's the only thing that we're doing here. And it moves things into a better direction, even when you're not sure what sensations you're individually dealing with, and those sensations can be adjusted to be external ones, which work for many of us. So dropping this emotion labeling, that step, it removes the part that depends on accurate interoception around emotions. So the practice stops asking for this thing that many of us can't reliably do. So from there, this entry point can match how your body actually works. So here's something that you might want to consider if any of this seems to resonate with your experience. So the next time that a practice asks you to find, say, a feeling, a sensation, an emotion in your body, and you sort of think like, I don't know, or something like that, what might you notice about your experience if you started from the signal that you can actually and somewhat reliably detect, and just noticed only whether it was pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, remembering that that sensation can be an internal one or an external one. And I'll also describe some of the adjustments that I personally make to something called tracking. So if you can't access internal sensations at all, you can always start outside of your body. You can opt for these external ones like temperature on your skin or the pressure of the chair that's currently holding you up. Both of these things give you something external that you can notice and even potentially regulate from. Temperature especially tends to be one of the most accessible signals for people with low or different interoception. So it's reliably a good place to often try to begin. You notice whether something is unpleasant or pleasant or neutral, and over time, some people can find that they can then work inward to interoception from that place. And then they can sometimes start noticing these internal sensations. So if you notice plenty of internal stuff, but you can't interpret it, you might also choose to move away from that interpreting. You just kind of drop the analysis and just sort of see what you notice and see if you can categorize it into pleasant or unpleasant or neutral without trying to figure out what that might mean. And if your internal signals kind of arrive late, you might opt to stop trying to track internally in the thick of things, and instead track those external sensations like pressing your hands into a table or a tree, or noticing the temperature of the room or something visual that stands out and that you might find pleasant. When you can't tell which of these you are, you might want to start with temperature or sound. These are signals that people can most reliably detect regardless of their interoceptive profile or status or whatever. And the pleasant or unpleasant or neutral question works the same way no matter where you begin, externally or internally. Some people eventually start picking up and understanding internal sensations through that external entry point. I haven't yet, and that's okay. The practice still does its job from the external place, interoception, and there's still a lot that can be done that's very valuable. There are other routes to regulation that work for how our bodies actually process information, and finding your specific version of this is the part that's individual for each of us. Knowing which entry point fits for you is one thing, but building it into a week that's actually it's something that actually sticks around for you, and then noticing what shifts over time, that's harder to do on your own. And that's the kind of thing that gets easier sometimes with another person present, like a co-regulator, which is something that coaching and workshops and group sessions, that's what they're really good for. If you want to do a temperature-based version of this with me, instead of just hearing about it, there are guided practices on the podcast feed for this show, which is launching next week. So if you're watching this, since this is a new channel, it's probably way in the future from now. You're a future person, and this podcast is probably already released. So look for a show called Wired Divergent, wherever you get podcasts. And if you want to help building this into your specific life, I'm taking practice coaching clients at a super low rate while I work towards my full professional certification. Coaching details and the booking link are in the description, along with the email list. And there should be some other episodes to check out that are hovering around my face if you're watching this as a video. I'm deHaan, and this is Wired Divergent. Bye for now.